topic is Brown versus the Board of Education and segregation in public education in the South. And our guests are Ms. LWynn and Dr. LBaldwin. Dr. Baldwin, let's see if we can end this final segment by having you to give us some information relative to segregation in higher education in the South. And of course, Ms. Wynn will end it by supplementing some of the information that you're dealing with.
As Ms. Wynn pointed out, the Plessy v. Ferguson case sort of established segregation across the board, not just in transportation, but in schools, etc. As early as the 1930s, the NAACP was interested in fighting for the implementation of equal education at the higher levels of institutions. It started in the 1930s, and of course, 1954 Brown v. Board of Education was sort of a culmination of much of what had happened since that time, the 1930s. But the impact of that decision on higher education was not great in the first 10 years. Studies showed that, in the first place, the decision had to do more with public education than with private education. And most of my career, I've been associated with private institutions, interestingly enough. But when you look at public institutions, you don't see a great impact of the decision on those institutions, particularly in the South, largely because of the resistance and defiance that I talked about earlier. Some statistics show that if you're looking at the period from 1955 up to 1965, for example, that the implementation of the decision occurred on a level of about slightly more than 2% in the southern states. But when you get to the border states, you get a higher percentage. But I think there was the feeling in the South, has long been the feeling in the South, that the federal government is trying to impose something on educational institutions. And I think that accounts in large measure for the kind of resistance and defiance that went on. But my experience has been, if you want to look at my experience, I've noticed over the years that desegregation or integration, if you want to use another term, has really not occurred on any grand scale since the Brown v. Board of Education, primarily because we haven't had the proper resources allocated, particularly financial resources. It's very, very important. Also, I think we have misunderstood the meaning of integration. Integration has to do not only with it has to do with mutual acceptance, not just rubbing shoulders and elbows. It has to do with mutual acceptance. It has to do with interpersonal, intergroup living, and shared power and resources. And I think that's the problem. That's where we've fallen short in terms of the allocation of proper resources to implement these decisions that have been passed down from the levels of the courts.
Would you agree with that the implementation has been sort of stymied because of available resources?
I think the implementation was stymied because of resources. Also, right after Brown v. Board passed, you can't forget about the Southern Manifesto, which was signed by almost all of the Southern senators and representatives, with the exception of the senators and representatives in Tennessee, Albert Gore, Percy Priest, and there was another one. I can't call his name right off the top of my head, but they did not sign the Southern Manifesto, which makes Tennessee a little unique in that respect. Dr.
Why don't you explain what the Southern